I declare open this public hearing for the committee's inquiry into the role of Australian agriculture in Southeast Asian markets. In accordance with the committee's resolutions of the 22nd of August 2022, this hearing will be broadcast on the Parliament's website, and the proof and official transcripts of proceedings will be published on the Parliament's website. Those present here today are advised that filming and recording are permitted during the hearing, and I remind members of the media who may be present or listening online of the need to fairly and accurately report the proceedings of the committee. I welcome representatives from the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry to give evidence today. And before I get you to tell us who you are, I'll just, out of courtesy, ask the committee to introduce themselves to you, commencing with Mr Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Rick Wilson. I'm the Federal Member for O'Connor, which covers the vast bulk of southeast of Western Australia, so a big grain producing region, but also beef, sheep and horticulture.
Excellent. Mr Wilcox?
Federal Member for Andrew Wilcox, Federal Member for Dawson. So I've got Mackay wedging up into Townsville, big horticultural area, largest cane growing area in the country.
And I'm Matt Burnell, Federal Member for Spence, the northern suburbs of Adelaide. We take in the largest uncovered cropping in the southern hemisphere.
And good morning, Meryl Swanson, Federal Member for Paterson, broadly in the Hunter region and stretching out into the beautiful area of Port Stephens. Hello, Dr Cookson, coming to us virtually there this morning. For the Hansard record, would you please state your full names and the capacity in which you appear before the committee?
Good morning, everyone. Tom Black's my name. I'm the First Assistant Secretary of the Exports and Veterinary Services Division of the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry. So I'm the export regulator for a lot of the great animal products that we export around the world. So think meat, dairy, seafood, organics, and then we do a lot of the technical market access negotiations as well.
Excellent, thank you.
Good morning, I'm Jo Granger. I'm the Acting First Assistant Secretary of the Trade and International Division. So for our department, we lead the bilateral and multilateral relationships, and we coordinate with our colleagues across the department to have those engagements and, of course, support the Minister of the Day in the international engagement.
Thank you. And Dr Cookson.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr Beth Cookson. I'm the Australian Chief Veterinary Officer, and I lead a program of work and have had involvement in delivery of our biosecurity and cooperative capacity building activities throughout Southeast Asia, as well as being Australia's delegate to the World Organisation for Animal Health, which is heavily involved in standard setting for animal and animal product commodities. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Although the committee does not require you to give evidence under oath, I should advise you that this hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament and therefore has the same standing as proceedings of the respective houses. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. And I invite you to make an opening statement before we proceed to members' questions.
Thank you, Chair. So we're very pleased to join you today, and we'd first like to underscore the crucial role of the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry that we play in ensuring food security and advancing Australia's agricultural exports around the globe, including in Southeast Asia. So we're the Australian Government authority responsible for regulating agriculture, fisheries and forestry exports and negotiating technical market access to facilitate trade. The department provides export certification and declarations that comply with both Australian export legislation and the requirements of importing countries. DAF operates the IT systems and services that facilitate trade. And we ensure the quality, safety and integrity of Australian products, improving their access to global markets. We have a network of specialised agriculture trade and policy experts posted as overseas agriculture counsellors covering the Southeast Asia region to support the department's efforts to help industry explore and develop new market openings, to maintain existing markets and to help resolve any issues exporters may be facing with clearance of their product at the border. In 2022-23, agriculture counsellors, supported by the DAF technical teams that are in Canberra, supported over $2 billion in agricultural trade to Southeast Asia. And I'm pleased to advise that earlier this week, Australia and Vietnam finalised market access for Australian plum exports to Vietnam and for Vietnamese passion fruit export to Australia. the Australian stone fruit industry has indicated that plum exports could be worth up to $7.5 million over the next 5 years with some business development. As you know, Chair and the committee, food security is vital to Southeast Asia, and Australia's reputation as a trusted supplier supports millions across the region. In 2023, approximately 22% of Australia's ag exports were destined for Southeast Asia, making it our second largest agricultural trading bloc. Australia's ag exports to the region have doubled over the last 5 years, growing 18% per year, year on year, since 2019, reaching $17.1 billion. As our market expands, there is significant opportunity for Australian exports to continue meeting nutritional demands. But however, as explained in our submission, challenges do persist. So as Southeast Asia enhances its food safety, animal and plant health systems, there's a growing demand for updated technical market access arrangements. While trade liberalisation has improved access, the proliferation of non-tariff measures, the introduction of new sanitary and phytosanitary requirements, and domestic policies that encourage self-sufficiency and diverting or trade diversification for the imports, they're all challenges for us. And we need a well-coordinated and whole-of-government and industry approach. DAFF leads the Commonwealth's efforts in international negotiations concerning agriculture-related measures to support our export and economic interests, and we do that in close consultation with other agencies, so with DFAT and with our representative industry bodies. So that's fora such as the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, the G20, the World Trade Organization, and then the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization and its standard-setting bodies. So Dr. Cookson was mentioning the World Organization for Animal Health, which sets the international animal standards. Codex, Mr. Black represents us at Codex, and that is the food safety standards for world trade. And then we also have the International Plant Protection Committee, and our Chief Plant Protection Officer and her team represent us there. And those standard-setting bodies are really important because, of course, they're setting the rules of racing for our trade. In terms of the work we're doing with our Southeast Asian counterparts, of course, we're working with them in these multilateral forums. We're working together to highlight the importance of free and open trade, rules-based trade, and that's obviously rules-based trade is central to underpinning global food security. We're looking for and advocating for an outcomes-focused, no one-size-fits-all to sustainability, and that's all about making sure that the standards and the settings at the border will be available for Australian agricultural product. Trade, of course, is not one way, and it requires the requests for prompt technical assessments of import from Southeast Asian governments are growing, and timely progression builds on our trade relationship. So this is the idea that for many of our markets, they want to trade with us and we want to trade with them. And so we are working hand in hand to consider their imports, and we're processing that technical assessment at the same time they're processing our technical assessment. So for instance, in China, we have a 2x2. We're looking to get market access for apples and blueberries from Australia, and they're hoping to send us kiwi fruit and jujubes. And we're doing that technical discussion right now. Trading partners are also increasingly seeking technical assistance. So for some of our trading partners, particularly in Southeast Asia, they're not really looking necessarily to get more product into the country, but what they're wanting is our biosecurity capacity assistance, technical assistance that helps them strengthen their systems and helps them trade with others, not just Australia. That's a really important element. And of course, we're also seeing a rise in the frequency and impact of transboundary animal disease outbreaks in recent years with significant effects on food security. For example, the introduction and spread of African swine fever killed approximately 20% of pigs in some countries, with significant impacts on pork availability. Australia, of course, we're recognised for our world-leading biosecurity system and for our expertise. And so Dr. Cookson will give you further updates about that in terms of the capacity building and the support we are providing. And when we're doing that, it's not just about helping our neighbours. We're actually pushing the border out. We're strengthening our own biosecurity by strengthening this biosecurity in our region. Look, as outlined in the Moore report, a significant step up in cooperation and trade opportunity in agriculture is really warranted. We need increased investment in DAFF's technical workforce to make sure that we're meeting these evolving demands. The agriculture and food security relationship with Southeast Asia is highly valued by that region, and an investment in it will deliver economic growth for Australia and for the region, and it will also strengthen our role as the partner of choice in the region. We're happy to talk further.
Thank you so much. Now, in the interests of time, I know that my colleagues have to leave a little bit earlier today, so Mr Wilson and Mr Wilcox, I might let you lead off, and then
thanks
Mr
very
Burnell
much.
and I can take it after that.
Thank you very much, Chair. That's common sense has prevailed. Well done.
Always.
So, firstly, thank you very much for your presentation and outline of the roles of the department in particularly in relation to trade into Southeast Asia. I can start with Mr Black. So you issue the phytosanitary certificates as...
My division issues sanitary certificates, so largely for animal products. Phytosanitary certificates are issued for plant products.
So you're only animal products?
Only animal products, but effectively it's the export regulator that issues those certificates.
Yeah, sure. So, and does every... I come from the grain industry,
Yep.
so West Australia exports a lot of grain into Southeast Asia. So the phytosanitary certificate for a boatload of grain, I understand that. If I was to export a container of grain, would I still require the permit, the certificate?
If an importing country requires a phytosanitary certificate,
okay, so it's
you would require a certificate.
So,
yes.
so not every container or consignment that leaves Australia has.
Depending on the importing country requirements, if a certificate is required, then we would require a certificate to be issued.
Yeah, sure.
All exports for prescribed goods, and grains is a prescribed good, need an export permit.
Yeah.
So absolutely, you would need an export permit because that's the no-go from the Australian government. Certificate is something that we provide to provide assurance around pest and disease status in the context of grains for the importing country.
Yeah, sure. So where I'm going with this is, given that we trade with a whole host of countries across Southeast Asia, is there any prospective sort of agreement whereby a certificate from the Australian Department of Agriculture could kind of be treated as a cross-border kind of access into those? I mean, each country has different requirements, but Australia has very high standards. I would suspect the highest standard in the region.
Just to be clear, as opposed to consignment by consignment, you want to be able to say, okay, an export coming from
Australia.
This company,
if I'm exporting
from
Australian wheat, Australia has a certain standard that we certify. Therefore, rather than have to negotiate with each individual country, I've got a certificate that certificate, if it was accepted across every country, rather than have to negotiate with every...
there are certainly, and this is where the standard setting bodies come into place.
Yeah.
There's certainly negotiations around the sorts of things you might see on a certificate and standardisation of terms as best you can on the certificate. But in terms of one certificate, one set of conditions that meets all markets, that's probably unlikely because each importing country has their own requirements according to their own pest and disease status, and because they might have different pests in a market or not in a market, and Australia, frankly, doesn't. They'll require different things. There are some things that we do have that others won't, and so the theory is very sound. The practical reality of everyone agreeing to one specific certificate, an agreed set of conditions from Australia, I think would be exceedingly difficult to do.
Okay, I mean,
likewise,
you're the expert, and that's why
I think if we flipped it onto the other way and said, would we accept something from another trading partner in the same vein?
Europe might be an example.
We would struggle to do that. Yeah. We would be wanting to know explicitly for a particular country that they met our requirements, consignment by consignment, in reality.
But the reason, the feedback that I've, like, so for example, cooperative bulk handling that export probably 95% of the grain out of WA, they have the resources to negotiate with individual markets, and but a small trader trying to get into the game or whatever, the resources required spread across a much smaller tonnage. Is sort of prohibitive for many of those smaller operators. So there's no prospectivity that we could have kind of arrive at an agreement that set a standard across. Grain's probably a lot easier than than fruit or horticultural products.
I think that would be a much slower burn, but we absolutely, when we're negotiating those conditions, and again, I'm coming from particularly the meat perspective and animal products, but we're trying to set it, frankly, the lowest common denominator that we can find to make it as easy as possible for everybody to participate.
The alternative is to set it at the highest common denominator, and that
that's not where we want to go. Noting on the other side, we have very strict biosecurity requirements, so we have high standards that we expect of others, and we have high food safety standards that we expect of others.
Yeah. And so, Ms. Granger, the non-tariff barriers, we're talking biosecurity here, but are they genuine concerns, or?
They are indeed, yeah. And the grain sector particularly, I think, highlighted in its submission a concern. So they're the kind of things like import permit requirements, quota requirements, which can be slow. The grain sector, in particular into Indonesia, is interested in what we can do to assist them on that. And in terms of it also plays into some of the work we are trying to do under ANZFTA, which is the Australia-New Zealand ASEAN Free Trade Agreement, where we can simplify systems, rules, processes. That's the kind of non-tariff measure that adds cost and complexity for not a lot of value. Yeah. And we are working with projects to do that. A classic one is the maximum residue limit for a pesticide. Mm-hmm. Codex, the food safety regulator, or standard setter, is setting MRLs for different products all around the world. And the ideal is that all countries use that international standard MRL. And that means if you grow your product, your wheat, and you're meeting that international standard MRL, you could send your product anywhere. Unfortunately, of course, the reality is many different countries have different MRLs. They're setting a higher or a lower pesticide setting. And one of the projects we have in ANZFTA is working to try and simplify those pesticide limits. It'll improve the situation in Southeast Asia production, but it'll make it easier for our export to go. And it'll be one of the simplifications of terms of meeting the importing market requirements.
Right, sure. I've got lots of other questions, but I don't want to take Andrew's time up, so...
Sure, thanks, Rick. Please, Mr Wilcox.
Thank you, Chair. So does DAF have an office or a physical presence in Southeast Asia?
We do. We have a number of agriculture counsellors based out of different Australian missions right across Southeast Asia. So we have an office and a minister counsellor and a counsellor based out of Indonesia. We have an officer in Malaysia, Bangkok. Yep. So actually, you're talking to two ex-councillors. So I was the former.
Oh, good.
I was the former minister counsellor in Bangkok for 4 years with the Roving Commission right across Southeast Asia. At that time, we only had a few, but we've expanded the network. So we've now got people in Vietnam, going back into Malaysia, Indonesia. Where else have we got?
Bangkok.
And Bangkok.
Yeah.
Actually, just while you're on that, sorry, Mr. Wilcox, to cut in there. Later on, I'd like to talk about that network and where else you'd like to see it expand to. So I just want to plant that seed. Sorry, Mr. Wilcox. Sorry, Andrew.
Well, you can put that on the record too, because that was what I was going to say, because relationships are very important in the Southeast Asia, and that physical presence face to face. So later on, when you answer that for the chair, it'll be on the record and I'll be able to read it. I'd like to know about whether we expand that, whether we're resourced enough, because that face to face contact really gives us the heads up, I believe.
Well, let's talk about it now while you're here.
What are your thoughts?
Well, there's a couple of components to it. As I said, absolutely face-to-face is really important in terms of being in those markets and getting to understand those markets, getting to understand the technical requirements.
And the relationship.
And the relationships, knowing who to talk to, all those sorts of things. So absolutely, that's really important. They can then be the on-the-ground contact for our industries when they come through or they're coming into a market. That permanent presence is really, really important. We've had people in place in some markets for a significant period of time associated off the back of free trade agreements. So the Thailand post was established to facilitate access after the Thailand-Australia free trade agreement went into place. Malaysia is a bit the same. So there's good reasons for us to be in those markets. I guess and having been a counsellor, I was only as good as the information that the department and the technical negotiators or the technical experts could provide me. So the flip side to having the presence is that you've got to have the technical capacity to do the grunt work, to produce the submissions and to provide the advice that the council then can take in and present to those markets. So it's a double resource. You're kind of the thin edge a very big wedge of momentum that is built up with the work that the technical people do in Australia with industry associations, with particular exporters to really understand what is required of the market and what Australian industry can meet, and then we push into that next component of actually doing that technical negotiation. The other reality is that at times, like it or not, the senior official from Canberra can actually help in some of these markets. So you might have done a lot of the legwork through the councillor, but particularly in Southeast Asia, the senior person flying into the market, having the face-to-face discussion with the boss at the other side is actually a really good thing as well, and can be the final bit of unlocking the puzzle. So it's a multi-pronged approach, but absolutely the on-the-ground presence is really, really important. Like, we work very closely with our DFAT colleagues, obviously at Post, so the economic side of the business, but also our Austrade colleagues where they're in market as well, and they do the business-to-business connections, but we do the technical bit.
Okay, and my second question is, how do we create more opportunities for perishable crops like fruit and veggies? So, given the fact that it's the closest area to us with a huge population, we can't travel with the perishable products. So how do we create more opportunities for that?
Well, a really big element of that is the technical market resources, the technical experts in Canberra who are doing that work to get access. And so this is the team of people in Canberra who are supporting the councillor at Post, and really for the committee. Those teams in plant biosecurity, animal biosecurity, and the exports division that Tom runs, they're a small team and they're trading with the world. So if we want to expand into Southeast Asia, we do need to put more resources into those teams with dedicated resources specifically focused on that market. And the other element of that is when you're there in market dealing with industry and supporting industry, those people-to-people links that you are highlighting is so important. And so it's relatively small funding, but funding to support industry to go over and develop business relationships, develop the people-to-people links, to do education and training, as well as people like Dr. Cookson's teams of the technical experts who are there doing that capacity building and supporting at a government-to-government level. So investment, I guess, in ongoing funding for councillors, because that's important, ongoing funding for the technical resources that actually are the key to unlocking more technical market access, and then capacity building funds, whether that's in the department's expertise, government to government, or to industry to support that relationship building. Collectively, those four things come together to deliver real value, and we know they work. Previous programs have delivered real value, and so we have a proper and tested return on investment. It really does unlock opportunity.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Rick, did you want to quickly ask something before you go on?
Well, just if I was an exporter of, say, meat product, who would who would you advise I speak to first? DFAT in terms of the market development, or you guys in terms of what technical specifications do I have to meet to get into that market? Australia's in a really fortunate position. We do have free trade agreements in place with most of ASEAN. So the tariff treatment, so that the tax effectively, is pretty well looked after for most of the meat stuff. So if I was a meat person now, I'd be making sure that, one, I'm export registered, so or I'm in the process of becoming export registered. So that's come to the department. Is that per country? So like, for example, Indonesia would be a separate
different requirements for different markets. There are. Yeah. So there are different listing requirements for various markets. We try and if you can meet the requirements of the US and the EU, you meet the requirements of many markets effectively. So that's a fairly high bar as well.
Sure. Okay. Look, thank you. So
thank you.
Apologies for having to.
Thanks.
No problem.
We'll come back, Chair, if we.
Thanks, Mr. Wilson. I appreciate that. Actually, just expanding on that, I'm really interested in the interface between, Mr. Wilson just alluded to it, what DFAT are doing and what you're doing. How do you work together? Is there a way to strengthen that? And I know that often areas, you develop excellence in areas, and everyone stays in their lane. So I'm just interested in that interplay and if there are novel ideas or if there's potential to increase our trade with Southeast Asia. I suppose the round question is, how do you play with DFAT? And, is it going well? And how can we make it better if it isn't? Or,
Maybe I'll start. I think we play very well with DFAT.
Great.
We have to. We're absolutely Team Australia, and we're very, very focused on that. And we understand our roles. No question from us. DFAT lead on FTA negotiation and frankly trade policy more broadly. We understand that. But when it comes to the technical stuff that sits underneath that, that's absolutely where this department comes into its own. And we have that deep technical expertise. We have, in the animal space, many veterinarians who work for the department. We have many plant specialists. We have seafood specialists. We have food safety specialists. So we have deep expertise in that regard. And then we also, as I mentioned before, we dovetail neatly in with the role of Austrade that obviously sits in the trade portfolio as well, and they do the business to business links. I've heard people talk about free trade agreements are almost like the key to the door, so they unlock the door. But if you don't have the technical access that's sitting underneath that, you can't push the door open.
Of course.
So we do the technical stuff, and then once the door's open, Austrade's kind of on the other side doing the business to business links. Helping you with the deals, helping you understand who's who in terms of the players that might be part of that real commercial supply chain. That while we're aware of it, it's not our core business. Our core business is the technical, making sure that we can provide the certification, put in the regulatory systems that assure that certification, and then see the goods moving. Anything else you want to add in that regard?
Yeah, I think just reflecting that we're, as the competent authority, the regulator, and providing those systems and support, we're also building those relationships with our competent authority colleagues and our government-to-government links in the technical space. And we're doing that on a bilateral basis. But as I mentioned before, we're also working with those important partners in multilateral fora so that we work together to get shared outcomes. And it's really important. Australia is a middle power, as you know. We're not the US, we're not China, and so we need to build coalitions of support, and we do that at the World Trade Organization through the Cairns Group, and our Southeast Asian partners in particular are really important in those fora. So in the standing setting bodies, we want to work with them really closely to build coalition of support to get the outcomes that work for all of us. We're doing that in all the standing setting bodies and with the multilateral fora, and that's a really important part of making sure that the rules of trade stay open and that we can continue to benefit.
Sorry, just getting back to the counsellor network, I'm actually really interested in this because I suppose it is something that you can sort of see and it's tangible and please don't misunderstand what I'm saying. The technical aspects of this are absolutely vital because if people don't understand the specifications that they've got to produce to, then they're not going to be able to trade anything. But in terms of those counsellors and Southeast Asia, so the places that you mentioned, where do we currently have people? And if we were the all-powerful recommending committee, where else would you like to have people for Southeast Asia that would make a measurable difference?
Right now we have two colleagues in Jakarta, a Minister Counsellor and an Agriculture Counsellor.
What's the difference between a Minister Counsellor and
It's just a more senior person, an SES Band 1. And for many markets, an SES Band 1 person allows you to unlock the door more, you get better access.
Of course.
And you can see more senior people. And particularly in markets like Southeast Asia, status is a very important part of the conversation, and it shows respect.
Hence Mr Black's comment earlier about, often you send someone senior from Canberra to meet with someone senior in that other country, and it unlocks a whole range of things.
Incredibly valuable, yep. So 2 in Jakarta, 1 counsellor in Bangkok, she's covering Thailand, Philippines and Singapore. 1 counsellor in Hanoi who is responsible for Vietnam, Cambodia and Laos. And then we have a position in Kuala Lumpur. That position is currently vacant, but we're sending a colleague out there soon. We hope to have that person in place by the end of the year. And that's doing Malaysia and Brunei. And really the reason we had to leave that position vacant was funding.
Right. So where else would you like them?
Look,
Or do you want to just shore
rec-
up the ones you've got?
We definitely want to shore up the ones we've got. We recently had a review of the councillor positions. So Mr Mark Tucker, who's a former Deputy Secretary of our department, he did a review of the councillor network back in 2020, and he did an updated review earlier this year, late last year, earlier this year. He recommended, we have 22 councillors altogether. He recommended we continue to have those 22 councillors. He saw opportunity in certain parts of the world to potentially put a few more in. For Southeast Asia, we think the 5 is the right number, but certainly ongoing resources for short-term postings where someone might go for 1 or 2 years to work on a particular topic would be very valuable. And for instance, as you well know, in terms of the government's response to the Moore report, a very significant investment has been made. Our colleagues in Jakarta have 10 new colleagues from DFAT and Austrade who are completely focused on deepening, strengthening ties, all the wonderful benefits of the Moore report. And we've got 2, and we haven't increased that. And of course, that extra engagement, which is fantastic, is raising expectations in our trading partners. And one of the key expectations it's raising is more market access. And for Department of Agriculture, our specialist people doing the plant, animal and export technical resources, we're the choke point. We need an expansion in those resources so that we can meet the expectation and really deliver. And so I think I wouldn't be suggesting to the committee we need, I think 5 is the right number going forward. It's an important way to build the relationship and maintain those relationships, but ongoing funding for additional opportunity in terms of short-term missions, and that opportunity to have a small bucket of money for the capacity building. Some of those programs are just so valuable. So for instance, the Red Meat and Cattle Partnership, that was a 10-year program between Australia and Indonesia. It was $60 million. And it was mainly funded by DFAT under Overseas Development Assistance. That provided a huge scope for fantastic people-to-people links. We trained Indonesians in stock handling. We built capacity. It was a very long-lasting and valuable partnership. And I know the committee's received submissions really talking about the excellent value of that relationship. Equally, we have programs similar called the Agricultural Trade and Market Access Cooperation Program. That was, in the end, about $30 million, and it provided a range of projects. It was funding to industry bodies and the RDCs to build those people-to-people links, to understand the market better, to do training and education. Those kind of capacity building funding either, and of course Dr. Cookson has some good examples. That small amount of funding goes an incredibly long way in terms of being able to have a strategic and deeper relationship.
Excellent. Do you want to?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. Yeah. Thanks, Chair. Been quite a focus on the biosecurity needs, and I'm just interested to understand where the priority areas are when we're looking at the Southeast Asian market, where you would like to see an improvement in capacity delivered, and what that looks like, and also how that then assists us on the two-way trade, because we're talking a lot about exports at the moment, but there is the trade back in, and I'm imagining that that's where we've got some pinch points. So I'd just like you to expand a little bit on that biosecurity.
Absolutely. I might ask Dr. Cookson to start, perhaps.
Yeah, thank you. Very happy to start and then to throw to colleagues in the room. Of course, I speak mostly from the perspective of animal biosecurity needs, and the committee will be well aware of the significant disease threats to Australia's north throughout the Southeast Asian region. Since 2019, for example, we've seen the spread of African swine fever, and then, of course, in 2022, lumpy skin disease and foot and mouth disease entered Indonesia. For foot and mouth disease, it was a recurrence of a disease that had been eradicated for 30 years prior, and that was a very unfortunate change to their animal health status. Lumpy skin disease was a continuation of spread of that particular disease globally. So, of course, those biosecurity threats are only ever increasing in their disruption of the animal health status and therefore the control and inputs that are required to manage those diseases in those countries, as well as placing increasing threat to Australia's own borders. Throughout the phase of Australia's assistance to foot and mouth disease and lumpy skin disease in the region, we did have some short-term funding available where we were able to support countries like Indonesia in particular, also some of our other near neighbours, including Timor-Leste and Papua New Guinea, to look at how they could respond and in some cases prevent and detect diseases coming in. And some of the examples of the work that we did there were around enhancing the biosecurity capacity in Indonesia's feedlot sector, of course, sort of preventing further spread, but also protecting Australian animals going into those areas. And that was a really good example of an activity that we conducted in partnership with industry, and we were also able to work with DFAT. I'm sort of going back to that question about how well we partner with DFAT to facilitate the vaccination of animals for foot and mouth disease and lumpy skin disease, and more recently working through the World Organisation for Animal Health to deliver rabies control programs in Indonesia, which continues to also be a problem. As has already been alluded here, the benefits of those programs are not only to the region from an animal health perspective and to Australia from an animal health and biosecurity perspective, but it also places Australia really well as a partner of choice in Southeast Asia to provide that unique expertise in animal and plant health. And as we've already spoken about, sometimes the requests from those partners in Southeast Asia are not about market access to Australia, but it is actually about these cooperation activities. From our perspective, in terms of where the priority areas are, it depends a little bit, I think, about what the what's identified by individual countries as their needs in building the relationship with Australia that then has those market benefits. In terms of immediate needs, Indonesia remains a priority area from an animal health perspective. We did have some funding to support those programs that ceased at the end of the last financial year. And so whilst we have got some ongoing elements of those programs through over the next couple of years, we don't have sort of dedicated funding to continue to meet the requests from Indonesia. They've also stood up their independent, their Indonesian Quarantine Agency, which is now distinct from their Ministry of Agriculture. That agency has sought biosecurity cooperation with the department, and we are looking to see what we can do to meet that request. But we don't have deep resources available to be able to do those really critical partnerships.
Dr. Cookson, can I just...
and just in terms of the other...
Sorry, can I just on that point, something, my antenna went up when you said that. Would you would you suggest to the committee that we make a recommendation about an issue such as that? I mean, that what you've said to me then just stands out to me like that could be a useful recommendation.
Yeah, my experience is that a small investment in the department being able to continue to meet the requests that come to us for capacity building and cooperation goes a long way in the relationships. It also allows us to maintain relationships at the technical official level, which can really facilitate discussions when they get quite hard in country. So if you've already got those pre-existing relationships throughout the technical system, whether that's laboratory staff or whether it's the policy officers within the relevant ministries, we know that those personal relationships are really important to be able to facilitate some of that. So yes, my preference would be for us to have that ability to meet these requests in an appropriate way. I don't think we need to grow it a lot from where it has been, but just that continuity of having some mutual projects provides a lot of benefit. We do seek to work with DFAT because often there are mutual benefits between what the country's development goals are and how biosecurity capacity building can support those. But it's not always possible to find the right partnership with DFAT at the right time to be able to meet the requests that come our way.
Certainly, thank you. I think we're just very cognisant as a committee, and I said this to DFAT when they came as well, help us help you. We're doing an inquiry. Clearly we're not experts in this, but we want to make recommendations that are truly valuable. So what are the resources that you need to improve the trade to Southeast Asia under that umbrella of the Moore report and all of? I mean, that when you read the report and the consultation that took place, it was extraordinary. Just hundreds and hundreds of points of consultation, which is fantastic. So I suppose, and I know this is a big question, but what would you recommend to us to make? And I know you've given us lots of suggestions already, but
yeah, I mean it's a really interesting question, and we're cognizant of being sensible about what an ask needs to be. Yes, there needs to be ongoing and growing at a sensible rate funding for the council network. Our costs, like everyone's costs, continue to go up. So you give us an amount of money now and say it's going to be this amount of money 5 years down the track, even if it's 5 years, it doesn't buy as much.
We're all trying to slay that inflation dragon, aren't we?
We all are, absolutely.
Yes.
So that's a challenge for us, and we're also, frankly, we're at the mercy of exchange rates as well. So when we're going into some of those markets, that our buying power just doesn't get there. So there's that component. We've talked about the technical component in Canberra because that allows us to do the work. It allows us to have those one-to-one relationships that Dr. Cookson talked about, but it also allows us to do that technical work at the international standard setting level. It's the same people. Right, so next week I'm chairing a committee in Cairns. I'm actually going to be on Dr. Cookson's home patch, which is all about import and export certification systems. 180 people from around the country, in person, a couple of hundred online, where we will be talking about standard setting for traceability, for equivalence of measures, for food fraud, all sorts of really important things around the trade of food, right? And so Australia invests in that because we see how important that is. We've led that committee for 30 years. It's a really important piece of work. So investment in our ability to do that, because it's the same people that you talk to there and can work on things multilaterally that you then might need to call on and talk to bilaterally to do your bilateral. Actually, we've got to fix this meat trade. Something's not quite working there. So that's really important. And then it's that capacity for the organisation to make some decisions through, from want of a crude description, a bucket of money that allows us to go, actually, we want to do some work with Southeast Asia on looking at alternative treatment pathways for table grapes into a particular market. Do we want to invest more money in improving irradiation? Or do we want to look at cold treatment? Or do we want to look at whatever else? Or do we want to expand the Australian fumigation accreditation scheme? There's a few different things that we can do, and having a bucket helps us to make decisions about putting it to the areas of need at a particular time.
We are just being called to a division, and given that it is 11:15, I'm going to say thank you for your attendance today. If you've been asked to provide any additional information, could you forward it to the Secretariat by Thursday the 26th of September? You will be sent a copy of the transcript of your evidence and have the opportunity to request corrections to transcription errors. And I would like to thank you for your time today and declare the public hearing closed.